Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cash Flow Positive. I'm your host, Kenny Bedwell, and we're just going to do one episode this week. And I'm going to be talking about how far $200,000 can really go in the short term rental market. I, I, I actually originally wanted to title the episode $200,000 is the new $100,000 because that's how I feel about it. That doesn't mean that it's not a lot of money because it is a lot of money, and it's not to discredit um, you know, the type of property and what you can purchase and so on. But the reality is, I'm starting to see a lot of people. And if you don't have $200,000, look, I get it. That's fine. But the concepts I'm going to teach you today, this episode is going to be really important because that $200,000 mark, in my opinion, is a mark where it's still not quite enough money to go into and this is the bold statement what I'm going to talk about and back up. It's not enough money to go into a highly competitive market and buy a 4, 5, 6 bedroom, a big property and compete. It's not. And that's exactly what I want to talk about today. So let's dive into it. You know, how far can $200,000 really go? First off, I want to share a story, a situation I had with a client. I had a client approach me and said, Kenny, I have $200,000. Let's roll. Let's do your property finder service. Help me find a property. The first thing I always ask, and this is really important, is how much money are you going to put down in the down payment? 10%, 15, 20, 25. Okay. Well, most people try to leverage as much as they can and they try to do 10%, but they have to get approved for this. This particular gentleman could not do that for whatever reason, and he was going to have to do 20% down. Well, for me, that tells me a number of things. Number one, he's going to have to put down a lot of funds to just buy the property, right? So we can't spend, and for those of you who are new to my podcast, one of the biggest things I talk about is you have to be willing to invest into your property. You have to be willing to invest into amenities and furnishings and design and make that property stand out. And so it's not about what the bank pre-approves you for is what you can actually afford in your true budget. Your true budget is based on what you have to invest into the property. And then I teach people, I've taught this several times before, the 20% rule. We should budget about 20% of the purchase price on amenities, furnishings, design, and improvements to the property. So if I buy a $500,000 home, I should budget about $100,000 into amenities and furnishings and design and updates. That doesn't include my down payment. So if my down payment's 20% and I have to invest 20% into the property to have a top property, my max budget is $500,000. Well, this gentleman comes to me, he's like, "Well, Kenny," and so I told him, I said, "Well, your max budget's $500,000. 200,000." He's like, "Well, that's a lot of money for just a $500,000 home." And I said, "You're thinking about it incorrectly. It's not about how much you can buy because psychologically that's what we want. We go, well, I got $200,000. I could buy a 800,000, $1 million property. You can, but that property is not going to cash flow. It's not going to produce the revenue you need it to produce to be a top property in the market. And that's the whole like goal. That makes life so much easier when you have a top producing property. And so on top of that too, he wanted to go into a very competitive market. And that market was Bradenton and Sarasota. And so when I was sitting down with it, I was like, look, like even if you bought a $500,000 property and you're going to have to put more than $100,000 into design. It's got to already be a short-term rental where you're covering some of your furnishings and you're just improving what's already there. You're putting in a pickleball court. You're doing all these extra things because it's a very competitive market. And the fact of the matter is if you're going to do 15, 20% down, $200,000 in markets like the Smokies, markets like Bradenton, markets like Asheville, North Carolina, the Bourbon Trail of Kentucky. These are all markets that I like, to invest in. But $200,000 on a 4, 5, 6 bedroom, like a big property, isn't going to cut it. You're going to be at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to the competition because you don't have the funds to compete. The amenity war is real. And I'm seeing it in all of these different markets. I'm starting to steer people who don't have 250, $300,000 to invest in properties. I'm starting to put them in different markets where there's just a lower barrier of entry, where there's not hundreds of investors going in. I can say this because it's my podcast, and I can frankly say what the heck I want on this thing. But look, when you see big brokerage realtors, okay, and this is no slight of them, okay, I'm calling it how it is, and I know you guys appreciate that. But when you see big brokerage realtors like Savvy with Tyler Kuhn and his team, and Avery Carl with the short-term shop, and other, realtors and stuff talking about these markets and people buying in these markets, and they're entering into these markets, and you're seeing these new agents pop up in these markets, it's too late. Okay. Now, look, if you recently purchased or you have a property there, I'm not saying it's too late for you. And I'm not saying, oh, you shouldn't have bought that. What I'm saying though is for people entering in, the barrier of entry keeps getting higher and higher and higher. And what worked last year to get by, or what you had to invest last year to have a successful property, doesn't work today. And it's not the same, oh, you need to have completely different amenities, but it keeps leveling up and leveling up and leveling up. And for the people who are already there, it's easy to level up if you have the space, right? You've already paid the money. You already have a cash flowing property that's successful. You have a foundation of reviews and establishment in the Airbnb algorithm. And it's easy to spend an extra 25, maybe $50,000 for most people who I'm focusing on bigger properties here. And even the smaller ones, you're not going to spend that. You're going to spend a little bit more, but still 10, maybe $15,000 more. It's easier to do that than to have to come in and put that on top of your budget already. You're already exceeding your budget. Now you have to go on top of that even further. So my point being is, you if you're going to enter into these competitive markets, you got to have the funds to invest into the property, or you need to downsize. And there's nothing wrong with downsizing. I would rather have a top producing 2 or 3 bedroom than over leverage on a 5 or a 6 bedroom and be the bottom of the barrel, right? When you have a top producing property, you don't have to worry about marketing or running Facebook ads or doing stupid dances on TikTok or whatever to get people to book your place, or hiring influencers and hoping that, helps and gets your place to it can, but if you got to do it, it's just like, why? Why do you have to worry about that when you have a top producing property? That speaks for itself. And so, um, what I want to get at, and we've got time to hit on a few other budget points, in terms of like, what would I do here? What would I hear? But my point being, and for this whole episode, is that we have to be willing to invest in the property. And if we can't do that, we got to go down on purchase price. And there's not, and also change where we're looking. This gentleman that was like, I just kept telling him, I was like, man, we're not going to be able to compete in the market. Like $100,000 in a 4 bedroom isn't going to cut it in Bradenton anymore. You need a pickleball court. Obviously you got to heat a pool, and most properties have pools there already. You got to have a really cool game room. You got to have good design. It's got to be really, I mean, I'm seeing splash pads in these markets now, right? Like that's crazy. I mean, that's like $40,000 right there. So for a good one. I mean, there is crazy money going into these markets and these amenities. And if you are chasing what everybody else is doing because they've had success there in previous years, you're going to have a hard time finding that same success today. It's just not how investing works, especially when there's an abnormal return on investment. So, this is a little bit of a finance lesson for everyone. So, anytime in any type of market, whether it's real estate, stocks, bonds, whatever, ETFs, whenever there's an abnormal return on some sort of investment, what happens is that that type of investment gets flooded, and we see it normalizes, it flattens out. The return starts to go towards zero, right? Because investors are piling up, piling up, piling up, and eventually there's no more juice left to squeeze. And so what we're seeing in the Airbnb industry is Airbnb got really popular and people are making lots of money. They start publishing that all over, social media and the internet, and everyone else is like, oh, I can go and replicate the exact same success. But here's the thing: markets shift, things change, the economy changes, and so we have to be able to adapt. Now, am I saying? And this is really important. jumping in the Airbnb market, is it late? Oh, like there's no juice left to squeeze. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if you go and do exactly what somebody else did a few years ago, you're not going to be able to replicate the same type of success. If you go and spend $200,000, if I had $200,000 2 or 3 years ago, I could have a really, really good property. I could do a big property and have really good returns. I could have a hot tub. I'm thinking of like, for example, the Bourbon Trail. I know a property that's kind of like one of those first comps that was out there about three years ago, and the guy had $200,000, and he was doing really well, and he just had a hot tub and a fireplace and a really nice modern house. Okay, but you can't do that today. That doesn't work on the Kentucky. Your down payment, and then whatever's left over for your furnishings and everything else on a bigger property like that. It's just not going to cut it. And so you got to go down. You got to go down in size of the property. Buy a 3 bedroom, buy a 2 bedroom, and now you're competing against all these other people who only have $100,000, and they're not going to be able to. They're over leveraging. That's what 90% of investors are doing, is they're thinking psychologically, they're thinking, I got to buy the biggest and baddest property out there based on what I'm pre-approved for, rather than I'm going to buy a property that I'm going to make the biggest and baddest with updates, with furnishings, with amenities and design. So read the markets, stop chasing the markets. I think we understand the that this concept, right? And that is a concept. The $200,000 is the new $100,000. But what do you do? Okay, what do you do if you have $200,000? Where do you go? What do you look for? So remember the 20% rule. So it all starts. Let's go back. You got to understand your budget first. Okay. And you need to understand the type of down payment you're going to do. So if you're looking for a new market to invest in, you actually need to go talk to a lender and go, well, what can I afford? What am I planning to do? So for example, I don't even need to talk to a lender to know that I'm going to have to do a DSCR, but I understand my lending situation. I know that if I go and try to get pre-approved for a second home, I look poor. Okay. And that's because I apply a lot of tax strategy. And there's nothing wrong with that. But now my circumstances change and I'm going to have to do 20% down. So knowing that I can take my cash on hand that I'm willing to invest and say, okay, well, I'm going to have to put 20% down. And then I also need to have funds for design and furnishings and amenities and so on. So $200,000 might be a $500,000 home. Could be an 800. It just depends on your down payment. So that's where you usually start. But let's say you are in the boat like me and it's a $500,000 home. Where do you look? I target markets in these situations that have low barriers of entry. Okay, what does that mean? Well, barrier of entry are markets where there aren't a lot of competitive amenities. They're markets where a hot tub is kind of the coolest and best thing out there. It's a lot of mountain markets, some rural markets, markets near state parks, maybe even some national parks that are a little less known, but there's still millions of people that go there. There's a lot of markets actually out there like that. Markets in Ohio, markets in West Virginia, markets in the Northeast, some of the ski resorts that only the Northeasterns know about near New York and Boston. Markets that are drivable, right? Like when I was in Buffalo, I think of Erie, PA, very affordable. If I had $200,000 and I invested in a property in Erie, PA, I would be the number one property in that market. Hands down, no questions asked. I don't even need to see what the top performers are doing. I would smoke them by a mile, right? Those are the kind of markets you should be looking at. And you might know some of them. But until you get to that $300,000, $400,000 mark, you can't go into the big boy markets unless you're going to buy a 1 or a 2 bedroom, right? So if you're really trying to, and in my opinion, this is my opinion, my experience, and there's nothing wrong if you go buy a 1 or 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom for ROI. There's absolutely nothing wrong at all. But if you want to maximize cash flow, the bigger properties are usually the better one, right? But if you don't have the funds to invest in the bigger properties, don't take them on. Don't do it because I said to do it. Start with go after ROI, go after cash on cash return. Go after the good 1s and 2 bedrooms where you can maximize your cash on cash return, build up your stockpile of cash, and then go into these more competitive markets and have a top dog property. So I just think that I think we gotta We have to be looking in new places. But the problem that most people have is it's scary to do that. It's scary to look into a new market and go, yeah, I think, I'm going to give a shot. I'm going to try this, especially for people you don't know some of these places. So what I typically recommend is people go look at major metropolitan areas and see where those people travel to. I think of, Chicago. Where do people it's a big metropolitan area. Where do people in Chicago travel to? Okay, they go, and when I say travel, it's not where they fly to, guys, it's where they drive. Where do they get away for the weekend? Because these markets tend to be more resilient with economic shifts than flying destinations because flying destinations cost more money. So people are more likely to drive places because it's cheaper to do so. So they'll drive. Where do they drive to? There's a lot of really good markets in and around driving distance from Chicago. I think of New York, Boston, large metropolitan areas, millions and millions of people. I just said Boston and New York. That's over 10 million people. I think that's like 12. Okay. Well, you also have New Jersey. You add that in as well. I mean, it's pretty much the same as New York, right? If you're from there, you're probably like, hey, but everyone else is like, it's the same place. There's millions. There's probably 15 million people at this point, even more, that are just in those areas. Where do they drive to? Right? There's multiple vacation. It's not just the Poconos, guys. New Yorkers don't just want to go to the Poconos, right? Like there are so many places that these people will vacation to that fit a variety of budgets. And your job is to just spend a little time and do some research and think about where people are coming from. I pick, let's, maybe go around the Southeast where you've got, North Carolina growing, Charlotte, Raleigh, even maybe Atlanta. Where are those folks going? Okay. You've got Nashville, Memphis. That's how you have Dallas, starting to work around the country, Dallas, Fort Worth area. Where are those people going? Got Houston and Austin and San Antonio. And then going up, obviously you got your California, LA and Phoenix, Salt Lake City. Like notice like what are drivable area vacation markets, like maximum 3 to 4 hours from these cities. Put a little radius on it. Find your vacation markets. I'm telling you, a lot of times you're going to find some really, really good, like just areas that people aren't talking about where your money can go further. So although the $200,000 is the new $100,000 today, is what I'm calling it, because it can't go as far in some of these bigger markets that everybody's chasing. If you go into one of these under the radar but still drivable markets that have, or traffic drivers and touristic demand and can legally STR, guys, I'm telling you, you will be the top dog, and that's the whole point of this, right? Um, so, now for those of you who don't have $200,000, well, what if I only have $100,000? What if I only have 75,000? It's the same concept. Go down on scale, go down on purchase price. Go after $300,000 home. There's a lot of markets that still have $300,000 homes out there. I kind of threw out a few already, but it's find places that match your preferences, your goals, and the most important ones, your budget. What can you even afford? Um, and look for these areas, look for these opportunities all around. They're out there, guys. They're totally out there. And if you focus top end on the cash I have to invest into the property, I'm promising you right now, your the time you have to spend on operations will be less. The time you have to spend on marketing and worrying about getting bookings. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that there's no seasonality and you're not going to have slow months and this and that, but you will be a top property. I think of my Watkins Glen property, $350,000 home 3 years ago. Okay. Put in about 120 into it with the down payment. That includes the down payment. Okay. And it's netting me it will net $80,000 this year. 80 grand. I grossed 144 again. Last year I grossed 145. This year I'm going to do 144. And the only reason why I made $1,000 less is because I did a renovation this year where I shut down the property for 3 months. So I had 3 months of income I wasn't able to get. So, but regardless of that, I probably would have made 150 this year if I had that 3 months because it was a slow season. But I would have gotten some bookings for sure. But the point being is that even with that, so there's types of opportunities like that out there. Okay. There's types of ones now. It might not be you're netting 80,000. You might net 30,000 or four, but that's still a crazy good deal on a 300 or $400,000 property. So you can't find that in the stock market unless you follow the Nancy Pelosi uh, auto trader tracker thing that I use. I kid you not, guys. So I saw an ad, little side turn here. I saw an ad for AI tracker, not AI tracker. It's like a auto trader app where it follows politicians' trades. And the ad was, if you can't beat them, join them. And I'm like, you know what? Like, that's so true. Like, I always get frustrated, like these politicians are like multi millionaires. And they came in like just earning, their salaries are like $150,000 a year salary. And they don't buy real estate. They don't do anything. Or so I guess some of them do once they're multimillionaires. But point is, they're not like investors, but they have all this money in, the stock market. They're making tons of money from the stock market, probably due to insider trading. And it's just frustrating. We've all heard the stories, and it's not. I'm not trying to pick on, oh, it's the Democrats. It's both sides. I see. There's a Dan Crenshaw one too that I follow. But there's this app that actually follows. It's called Autopilot, and it follows these politicians and their trades. And so when they buy, it buys. When they sell, they sell. And I kid you not, I started it, and you can pick. They call them trackers, and then whoever's name. And you can do politicians, you can do business like Warren Buffett, all these people. But I have a Nancy Pelosi one, and I am up in 3 years. I have a 48% return on that. 48%. That is absolutely ridiculous. Like I'm like, why didn't I think of this sooner? Like, why did I even buy real estate? I could just be tracking politicians' trades and be wealthy from that. But anyway, so autopilot, if you want to check that out. But my point being, guys, is just going back to the whole short-term rental side. Maybe I've inspired everyone to just stop what they're doing with short-term rentals and go do follow politicians in their trades. But my point being is your short-term rentals, and especially in the future, we got to think not just today. It's not a snapshot of today and what's worked in the past. We have to be thinking futuristic. We have to be thinking in the next year. And there are always properties popping up. It's hard for us to think like futuristically, right? We're always thinking about like, well, performance wise, what did the properties do in the last 12 months? What was their average revenue? What was their, seasonality? What was the demand trends? And we always look at past data, but we're never thinking about futuristic data and things that are happening. And I hear it all the time. Oh, well, I'm launching a property, but I keep seeing other properties that are, when I looked in this market, there was nobody that had these things. Now, like I keep seeing properties pop up that have all these things. I hear that a lot. Okay. And it's because we're not training ourselves to think futuristically. We're training ourselves to think what we saw in the past is a snapshot. And that's exactly what's going to happen today and in the next year. But reality is people will continue to enter into the market. So if you understand that concept and you think that way, then you understand that investing in your property and playing chess, not checkers, mean being very strategic on the guest avatar and catering amenities and adding things to them is what's going to set you apart. That's the secret. That's what's going to help you withstand competition and really build a moat, the thing that separates you from the competition, and separate yourself and protect and insulate so that you can have long lasting returns. So think forward, think about people entering in the markets. So when I talk about the barrier of entry, it's not that I'm not assuming other people won't come into this. Remember, it's the same, it's the financial concept that when there's ungodly returns or returns that are just absolutely insane, unless there's some sort of regulation or cap or legal protection, other investors will swoop in and take and want to take advantage of those returns. So if you're doing that today, you're seeing a place where there's, really great returns, then you need to understand that it's only a matter of time before other investors enter into that market too, once they see the returns that you're getting. So it's so important to find properties that we can create moats that separate us, that we can invest into. That's the key to success. And remember, maybe if you guys want, let me know if you want me to talk about moats again and what different types of moats are out there besides location or waterfront or mountain views. Okay. I'm happy to do that. I've done that before. If you're new to the podcast and you're like, man, I'd really like to hear about different types of moats and how to find properties with moats, please send me a message. You can go to my email. My email is not Kenny, it's Kenneth. I'm very formal. It's a corporate thing to have, but you can email me or message me on Instagram. My email is kenneth.bedwell@strinsights.com, or you can message me on Instagram. That's usually preferred at Kenny_Bedwell. And if you haven't given me a follow yet, you're listening to this, please follow me at on Instagram or Facebook. A friend request me, shoot me a message or whatever and say hi. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. This is going to be the only episode for this week. And we'll get back to the normal routine the following week. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And if you did, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. That helps people know that the show is worth listening to if you found value in it. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Cash Flow Positive.